I want you to imagine a specific kind of moment. The kind where the universe hands you something so perfectly timed, so cinematically precise, that even you, the person it is happening to, almost has to pause and appreciate the sheer artistry of it. The kind of moment where every single year of grinding, every sleepless night, every snide comment you swallowed with a smile, every time you were patted on the head and told you were strong enough to handle it on your own, all of it crystallizes into one single, glorious, irreversible second. That moment happened to me at the Whitmore Charity Gala, and it started with a whisper. I was standing near the silent auction table, wearing a dress I had tailored 6 months earlier, holding a glass of sparkling water I hadn't touched yet, when my aunt, my father's older sister, the woman who had sat at our family dinner table for decades, leaned toward the woman beside her, glanced in my direction, and whispered the following 7 words with the kind of casual cruelty that only comes naturally to people who have been practicing it for years. "That's my poor niece. She's faking it tonight." She smiled after she said it. Her friend laughed, a polished, practiced society circuit laugh, the kind that says, "I understand exactly what you mean," without requiring any further explanation. And then they both turned back toward the real guests, the important ones, the ones who, in their estimation, actually belonged in that room. Now, here is what my aunt did not know, what nobody in that ballroom knew, not the event coordinator, not the foundation's board members, not a single person making small talk over shrimp cocktail. At 6:47 p.m., exactly 14 minutes before my aunt whispered those words, my phone had buzzed in my clutch. I looked down at the screen, read the notification twice, felt my hands go very still, and quietly put the phone away. $1.3 million donated to the Whitmore Foundation by me that night, anonymously, to the exact same cause my aunt was about to spend the rest of the evening accepting applause for pledging $50,000 toward. And when I found my cousin 20 minutes later and quietly tried to share what I had just done, not bragging, genuinely just sharing because I was happy about it, she looked at me with flat, tired eyes and said, "Please don't try to make this your moment. Tonight is about Auntie. Don't steal her spotlight." My stomach dropped. Then I smiled, because I knew something none of them did, and I was in absolutely no rush. Let me take you back, because none of this makes sense without the foundation it was built on, and that foundation was laid one condescending comment, one deliberate exclusion, one loaded comparison at a time across the better part of 2 decades. My aunt is not a movie villain. She does not plot in dark rooms. She does not cackle. She brings beautifully arranged fruit platters to family gatherings. She remembers everyone's birthdays. She gives warm, lingering hugs. And then, in the very next breath, delivers the kind of observation that lodges itself in your ribs like a splinter and stays there for years. She is the type of person who has convinced herself completely, sincerely, without a single doubt, that she is simply being realistic, practical, honest. She would tell you she is the most loving person in the room. She would mean it. That is exactly what makes her so dangerous. Her children, my 2 cousins, were enrolled in elite preparatory academies before they could read chapter books. She drove 45 minutes each way every single day because the school's student-to-teacher ratio was superior to everything closer. She hired private SAT tutors at $200 an hour. She paid for summer coding programs, speech and debate camps, international language immersion trips, model UN conferences. When her son turned 17, she bought him a car. Not a starter car, a vehicle that cost $200,000. When her daughter turned 18, another one, same price point, different color. She described these purchases as investments in confidence. The total she had funneled into her children between tuition, tutoring, enrichment programs, trust fund contributions, and luxury items crossed $750,000. She spoke of this freely, proudly. She wore it like a badge. And then there was me, the other branch of the family, the one that, according to the unspoken but perfectly clear hierarchy my aunt had established, did not require the same level of investment. Not because there was any shortage of capability, in fact, the opposite reasoning was always deployed. I was told, from the time I was old enough to understand what was being communicated, you are strong, you are capable, you will figure it out. Presented as a compliment, functioning as a closed door. When I won a regional science competition at 16, my aunt congratulated me warmly and then told my father it was probably a one-time thing. The real talent, she said, gets recognized consistently. When I launched my first freelance software project at 19, built on 3 years of part-time savings and entirely self-taught skills, she called it a cute little hobby. When I landed a contract that paid more than most of my peers were making in a full year, it was called lucky timing. When her son scraped through his 3rd year of prep school with average grades and 0 distinguishable academic achievement, she described him at every family gathering as understated, quietly brilliant, the kind of mind that does not perform well on tests but shines in real life. She delivered this assessment with the absolute certainty of a woman who has never once considered that she might be seeing what she wants to see. I want to be precise about what was happening here. It was not simple favoritism, though it was certainly that. It was something more structural. I was being assigned a role, the contrast, the one who managed on her own, which made her generosity toward her own children seem reasonable, even necessary by comparison. I was the proof of concept. Look, someone in this family made it without help, so clearly not everyone needs the safety net we've been building. The logic was circular, and it was airtight, and nobody questioned it because it served everyone who was benefiting from it. I coded through nights with no mentor. I learned from free tutorials at 2 a.m. I bootstrapped everything. I asked for nothing because I had been told, very gently and very consistently, that I was the kind of person who did not need to ask. And for years, for embarrassingly many years, I believed that framing. I internalized it. I worked harder because of it, which is the one accidental favor the whole dynamic did me. But I also swallowed things I should have said. I smiled at comments that deserved a response. I showed up to family dinners and sat at a table where the rules of engagement had been written without my input, and I followed those rules, and I called it being the bigger person. I was not being the bigger person. I was being accommodating. There is a difference, and it took me a long time to understand it. By my late 20s, the ventures I had built had grown beyond what I let myself openly acknowledge. A software consultancy I started at 23 had scaled into something real and recurring. A SaaS product I co-developed with 2 partners was generating consistent monthly revenue. An early-stage investment I had made, agonized over, triple-checked, made with money I had saved by eating at my desk and not taking a vacation for 2 years, returned multiples that felt surreal to say out loud. Altogether, the portfolio had crossed $7 million. I was not loud about this. I drove a modest car. I reinvested almost everything.
Were real, and they were mine, and I had built every single one of them from scratch, with no trust fund, no family capital injection, no soft landing if something went wrong. Then came the dinner, 8 months before the gala. The startup was at a stage where targeted outside capital could accelerate the trajectory significantly. Not save it did not need saving, but multiply it. I had done the projections, I understood the ask, and I thought, naively, that maybe the family dynamic had shifted enough over the years that the door might crack open at least slightly. I presented the opportunity calmly, respectfully, almost apologetically, which tells you everything you need to know about how thoroughly I had absorbed the script that had been written for me. I explained the business, I outlined the risk profile. I made it clear that I was not asking for charity. This would be a formal investment, with equity, with projected returns, with a legal agreement. I looked at my aunt, because she was the one with accessible liquidity, and everyone at the table understood this without saying it, and I said that even a portion of what she had already committed to other things in the family would make a meaningful difference to the growth timeline. She put her fork down. She looked at me the way you look at someone when you have already decided what you are going to say and are simply waiting for the socially appropriate moment to deploy it. And then she said, with the practiced gentleness of someone who has been delivering these kinds of sentences for years, "Beta, we have already committed $750,000 to the children's futures. We simply cannot abandon that track. They have a certain status to maintain, certain circles they need to move in. Their world is more visible, more pressured. You understand. You always find a way. You're the strong one in the family. You're the strong one. You always find a way." I nodded. I said, "Of course, no problem. I completely understand." I excused myself to get water. I stood at the kitchen counter alone and looked at the wall and felt something shift very quietly inside me. Not rage, something colder and much more useful than rage. A single thought, very clear, very steady. If I am truly so capable, if I truly need nothing, if I am truly the strong one, then why has zero been offered in 20+ years of proving exactly that? Not even a question, not a single, "Tell me about the business," not one genuine expression of interest in what I had built. $750,000 toward her children, including $200,000 cars as confidence investments. And to me, across decades of documented, consistent compounding achievement, the warmest possible version of absolutely nothing. That was not strength being honored. That was convenience being maintained, and I was done being convenient. 3 months after that dinner, I was helping my parents sort through old storage in their attic, the kind of task that families defer for years and then suddenly can't avoid. I was moving boxes, not reading anything, just cataloging and stacking, when a manila folder slid out from behind a filing cabinet that had clearly not been moved in at least a decade. I almost put it back. The folder was clearly not meant to be in my parents' house. It had probably migrated there through some long-forgotten family shuffle of documents and never found its way back. I almost put it back. I want to be honest about that. I almost chose not to know. I read it, and what I found was not a surprise exactly. It was more like a confirmation of something I had sensed for years, but had never had the hard documentation for. It was a trust fund filing, formal, notarized, dated 5 years prior. My aunt had established structured trusts for both of her children, $250,000 each, with documented ongoing contribution commitments. Standard enough. What was attached to it was a letter to the family financial advisor detailing the priority structure for any discretionary family wealth allocation going forward. The language used to describe my branch of the family was precise and clinical and, in its own way, devastating. It read, "Other family members are independently capable and do not represent standard welfare cases eligible for structured support. Not overlooked, not forgotten in the bustle of life, formally assessed, formally categorized, formally excluded." Someone had looked at the family tree, decided who warranted structured financial support and who was already covered by their own capabilities, and written that decision into a legal document. This was not an oversight. This was architecture. The hierarchy I had always sensed had been given a formal address and filed with a notary. Then, a few weeks later, I was at a family gathering and found myself near an open window, hearing, quite clearly, a conversation happening in the garden below. My aunt's voice. She was speaking to my uncle about the upcoming charity gala. She was explaining that the family's charitable giving that season would be directed strategically toward causes that would strengthen her children's public profiles before their college applications went out. The word she used was visibility, strategic visibility. The charity work was infrastructure. The generous giving was a long-form PR campaign for her children's futures. And my branch of the family, she said, was fine to handle things on their own, as they always had. And then a younger cousin, completely unaware of any of this, just making cheerful small talk at a birthday party a month later, mentioned almost in passing that her mother had been planning the donation to the Whitmore Foundation for over a year, that it was going to look incredible for applications, that it really was a brilliant 2-for-1, genuine impact and excellent optics. She said it the way you say things that are completely normal to you. She moved on without registering what she had just handed me. I had been the pity case this whole time, not the strong one, the useful contrast, the proof that help was unnecessary, the poor niece, and they had put it in writing. I drove home that night in complete silence. No music, no podcast, just the sound of everything clicking into place, piece by piece, with the cold mechanical satisfaction of a lock that has finally found its key. I want you to understand the discipline this required. In the months between that discovery and the gala, I showed up to every family dinner. I smiled at every one of my aunt's announcements about the upcoming event, the venue, the gown she had chosen, the fact that her pledge was expected to be among the highest individual donations of the evening. I said, "That's wonderful," with genuine warmth in my voice. I asked follow-up questions. I clapped when she described the cause. I was a perfect, supportive, uncomplicated family member, and not one single person at those dinners had any reason to suspect that I was building anything. I had been following the Whitmore Foundation's work for nearly 2 years before the gala came up. Their education infrastructure initiative, building community learning centers in underserved districts that had been without adequate facilities for over a decade, was work I genuinely believed in, not because it was strategically convenient for me, because it mattered. Because when you have built something from nothing, using every free resource you could find at 2 a.m. because nothing else was accessible to you, you understand viscerally what proper infrastructure can do for a person who is trying. This was not a prop. This was a cause. I contacted the donor relations team. I specified the amount, $1.3 million. I requested full anonymity for the initial processing stage. My name would not appear in any public-facing acknowledgement until I released the hold. This was the critical piece. The donation needed to exist, confirmed and timestamped, and documented before anyone in my family knew it had happened. I needed the receipt to exist before the conversation did. I built a folder on my desktop. I called it Plan B, though if I'm being honest, by this point it had become Plan A. Inside it, the donation confirmation receipt, the bank transfer record, the foundation's formal acknowledgement letter, screenshots of every step of the process, time-stamped and organized with the kind of compulsive precision you develop when you have spent years building cases that nobody believed until the numbers were undeniable. I printed the key document. I folded it. I put it in the inside pocket of the jacket I intended to wear to the post-gala family dinner.
At dinner after dinner, in the weeks leading up to the gala, while my aunt described her $50,000 pledge as the most significant individual gift the foundation was likely to receive this year, I nodded. I said I was sure it would make an incredible difference. I meant neither of those things. But I kept perfect composure because I had learned something important over the years. The most devastating response to someone who has underestimated you is not anger. It is patience. Let them build the story. let them get comfortable in it, and then show them, very quietly, very completely, exactly how wrong it was. The post-gala family dinner was held the following Sunday at my aunt's home, 12 people around a table that had been set with the specific care of a woman who wanted the atmosphere to match the occasion. She had been photographed 3 times at the gala for the foundation's social media accounts. She had been introduced from the stage as one of the evening's most generous contributors. She had stood in 6 seconds of applause with the composed, gracious smile of someone who has rehearsed this exact moment many times in the privacy of their own mind. She was still radiating it at dinner. She described the gala in detail over the appetizer course, the lighting, the silent auction, the speech from the foundation director, the room's reaction when her pledge was announced. She described it again, with slightly different emphasis, over the main course. A family friend who had been invited to the dinner, not a blood relative, a long-time social acquaintance, leaned across the table and said, "It really is extraordinary. The $750,000 you've put into the children's futures, and now this on top of it. You are a remarkable woman. This family is so lucky to have your example." My aunt accepted this with the practiced modesty of someone who fully agrees, but knows it is more elegant not to say so directly. She touched her necklace. She said something like, "We simply do what we can." The table murmured in warm agreement. I set my fork down gently. I said, and I kept my voice at precisely the same warm conversational register as everyone else at that table, "Would anyone mind if I shared something for just a moment?" 12 heads turned. My aunt smiled the smile of someone who has just been praised and is feeling magnanimous toward the rest of the room. "Of course," she said. "Go ahead, Beta."